Good evening, everybody. It's really nice to see that so many people showed up to the Data Science Learning Meetup and actually stayed also for the data product panel discussion. It may look like a press conference, it's just a data product panel discussion, guys. My name is Jules and I'll be moderating this panel discussion. I have a background in research in data products and practice. The first time I started in 2022 from an academic context, and then since last summer from a startup context. Before we dive into the data product panel discussion, I would like to ask one thing of you, and that is, if you have a question about anything that has been touched upon, just raise your hand and ask the question directly. As such, we can make it interactive. We can also steer the discussion towards what you think is most interesting, actually. All right, sounds good? Yeah. Perfect. So yeah, let's dive into it. Introduction round. Jean-Georges, if you would like to start, like background, current role, and when was the first time that you got in contact with a data product?
I took some notes because I'm getting old. So my name is Jean-Georges Perrin, and as our host said, I'm coming from Strasbourg, but that's actually where I was born. And when I realized that the real capital of Europe was Brussels, I left to the US, where I'm living. And they don't call me Jean-Georges Rosiers, it's too complicated, so that's really pleasant to be in Belgium, where people know how to pronounce things. They call me JGP. So. But technically, I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for a company called Avia Data, and I'm also the chair of a Linux Foundation project called Beetle, and the mission of Beetle is to standardize artifacts for modern data engineering, like data contracts, data products, data mesh, and other stuff that is coming. I'm a lifetime IBM champion. I'm a PayPal champion, and I share with Wannes the title of a data mesh MVP. And so, does that answer it, or you want more?
Maybe next time. Wannes, can you also provide like a brief introduction about yourself?
I've previously been leading data teams in Belgium. SN Belgium, firstly, the energy supplier. Later on, DPG Media, largest media company, and also Golazzo, sports events organizer, Memorial and Dama, Antwerp 10 miles. So that one time you can't use the ring of Antwerp, that was me. I'd rather introduce you when I first felt the need for data products, not when I encountered them. And later on, that led me also to the need of platform thinking, and that's how I now ended up at Conveyor, a data platform produced by Data Minded, Leuven company. More about that in drinks, because it's not a sales pitch. But the first time I felt the need for data products was at Ascent, small Belgian company, part of a large European group, representing 0.25% of revenue of the group, so you're not relevant at all. And that was, let's try to be relevant on a different way. And they decided, let's try and build our new operational system, so a CRM system, billing system, payment system, all open source, all cloud-based, very cool for a company to do that without any IT knowledge, without any IT management knowledge. And at the end of the chain, I was responsible for building also a new open source and cloud-based data platform. And I really felt the need for data products because every release of the operational system, my data platform was down, or all data pipelines was down. But that's where people notice. That's where people start complaining. And that's where I said we need to try to introduce the concept of data products, putting responsibilities in those building the operational system.
Nice. Okay, last but not least, I hope. So Nikki Bueno de Mesquita, I probably am the only one here that has a business background, majored in information management. And I've been in data for around 7 years. My specialty is pricing, and then especially pricing for a lot of products at the same time, which I did before my current role as data product manager, or head of data products actually, at Otrium. Otrium is an online fashion outlet. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Roermond, but this is the online version of that, where you don't have to stand in line and be with all of the crowds. We have about 100,000 products that we sell at limited quantities, so pricing is quite important for us being an outlet player. And I guess that's probably the first time I encountered data products, because we realized that we needed to have a great data infrastructure to actually build our pricing models in a way that they produce good pricing recommendations for a lot of products at the same time. After that, I got also personalization in my portfolio. That's my second data product. Even more important, so that you know which user you have in front of you, because it's awkward. I guess nothing is more awkward than sending bras to males and other stuff to females. So yeah, fixing that at the moment, and it's been quite a nice journey.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Before we dive into the specifics, I think it is very important that a shared foundation, because your data product is there and another place and somewhere else, and then sometimes you're just like confused, are we even talking about the same thing? So as such, I would really prefer to first have like a basic, a shared foundation, and then thereafter we can go into a little bit more of the specifics of it. Jean-Georges, would you like to give us your definition of the data product and which artifacts are included in data product?
It's a really tough one, because the thing is, I answer differently based on who's asking the question and how much money they have. But seriously, if it's a technical question, it's completely different than if it's a business question. From a business perspective, usually people understand what a product is, and then you just explain that, well, you know what a product is. Well, now you're thinking that your data is going in a product, so you can have all the life cycle, all the way you've been managing your products. Well, you can do it the same way with data. Okay? So very quick, and usually it sticks, and people are happy. When you're talking to engineers, specifically data engineers, it's a bit more complicated. So I say it's an assembly of data contracts. So usually ask another question after. So that's why, actually, I forgot something. That's why it's about product reasons. That's why I usually write books. So for data contracts, when they ask a question what the data contract is, I give them that. And the first smart question in the audience, smart, will get a copy of the book, eventually signed.
Perfect. Let's dive into data contracts at the end of the discussion. Let's just stay at the product side. Nikki, this is maybe interesting for you. Like, when becomes a data set a data product at Otrium? To make like a clear distinction for the audience.
Very good question. So I think for us, it really starts sticking for people if you say that this data can provide value. I think that's the most important part for a business that is in the money-making business, let's say. So that's where it started for us, initially in pricing, because we realized the better we create that data, the better we maintain it, the more money we can make out of that data and the more effective we can make our pricing. So I think that's the first part. It needs to be value that comes out of it, and the more clear you can make it, the easier it's to sell it. And then I think the second part is it is something that you use on a regular basis. In my case, we use it every day, and that's something that you want to keep maintaining, certainly if it creates value. So for us, those are the two main criteria at the moment for something to become a data product.
Perfect. And Wannes, for example, you've been working at Compare, of course, data platform that hosts data products. What do you see as like main design trade-offs that different companies they deliver these data products at eventually?
Yeah, I think a data product, first of all, it's a product, so it's about being valuable, as both of you are saying, but it's also balancing with feasibility. And then as Nikki is saying, it's about reusability. So what you quite often see is that you do not only have source-aligned data products, but products built on top of each other, having an entire chain of data products built towards an end goal, built towards a purpose. And I think that's where quite often it starts. What's the purpose of a given data product? Why am I building this? What I want to get out of it? And then it becomes a balancing exercise. Do I really want to have a product fit for purpose, really specific into something? Or on the other hand, do I acknowledge the fact it needs to be reusable and that I can build upon? And that's a difficult balancing exercise which you need to take into account during your design phase. And then probably that also demands some kind of pragmatism. We're all in data. We all know that at a given moment in time, there's someone asking, can you add this one or two fields to my report? It's kind of the same thing to my data product. That's not necessarily that those two extra fields belong to the same domain where the data product is owned, if you talk about ownership. But maybe it's pragmatic to just add them. So that's a second design question. It's balancing fit for purpose and reusability, and then pragmatism, how strict do I set the boundaries of a given domain and a product?
Now when we stay at the reusability side, Jean-Georges, I've seen online, of course, they were a real big support of open source, and for example, introduction of standards. Regarding the reusability, what's like the core of this data product standard?
So the first data mesh I built, data mesh is not data product, but the thing is, for us, the goal was to build a data mesh. Well, the goal was not to build a data mesh, but it was to build a platform that had the same traits as a data mesh. And we ended up building a data mesh. But what we realized is that when you look at what Mike Pagani was saying in our vision articles and book, is that you build this as an assembly, as a collection of data products. And then we kind of realized that each data product needed some kind of a resource descriptor in a way. Because if you want to make a software component generic, you've got to have its configuration on the side, and the component itself is either a library or a sidecar. But you've got to have something that configures it. And so we started by defining, hey, this is going to be a resource descriptor. And then we realized that our resource descriptor was a data contract. And the things, and when I was still at PayPal, what we decided is, let's open source this thing, okay? The motivation for doing it when I was at PayPal was really, if people want to sell us stuff, as software, security software, code generator, synthetic data generator, whatever you want based on data contracts, it would be better if it's an open standard. Then I left PayPal, and what I decided is to I push this standard towards the Linux Foundation. Okay, so to make sure that it's not only one group of people that controls it, but many. Okay, and so we created this project Beetle with the ambition of having more than just a data contract, but also a standard for defining data products. Okay, so that's 2024 is the release date, and yeah, very precise. I don't want to put pressure on the members of the TSC. One is in this audience. Okay, so the way we decided to govern this is via it's a standard thing for open project, okay, an open source project. It's not open source here; it's open standard, which I think is even stronger than just open source. And the Linux Foundation, the way they work is we've got what we call the technical steering committee. And the technical steering committee is composed of 15 people, It can be more, it can be less, but that's what we have done. Actually, I think we're even 16. And the exercise I played when I composed the first TSC was to keep in mind to have users. So basically, contracted data product users, service providers, and software vendors. And so we've got 5 of each. Jörg here in the room. Is one of the TSC on the service provider side, and I think that having this mix kind of guarantees a way that we are not, it's not going to be completely taken apart by one group or made them. Okay, so we're like a lot of open source. Because when you look at open source, for example, you can see. I'm just going to pick on one. If you look at Delta Lake, for example, from Databricks, okay, which is super popular, but you look behind and you see that 92% or 95% of the contributions are from Databricks. This is not super open. Okay. Iceberg on the other side, it's a little bit more of a mix. Okay. I'm not opposing the product. Okay, you make your choice. But so, and that I also see some people creating open standards and saying, hey, it's open standard, but yeah, I can't call it open standard in the US because of the First Amendment. I can say any bullshit I want without really, okay. But the thing is, it's not open. So we're really trying to open. So when I'm here and talking to you guys and gals, I'm really trying to convince you to look at more like, if you buy things from me, I'm okay too. But the thing is, it's really looking at open standards, and when you're thinking about building data products, looking at the standards that will help you scale and go to market in a faster way.
And then, especially regarding like the open data product standards, also for standardization within, for example, enterprise software, right? I see that there are quite some differences even within the same enterprise regarding which data product definition do we actually use. Let me just zoom out a little bit and go again towards like go back to the ideation phase, because for example, when we have data products in practice, we start with ideation, then we start the design, the building, the deployment, then depending on what you're doing, it's maintenance of usage or depreciation. And then I think this one is very interesting to get an answer from Nikki on is when you ideate on data products, what are like your main considerations before you really start designing them? Is there, for example, a particular business question that needs to be answered? Is there, for example, a certainty needed that it will provide value? How do you measure that, for example?
Yeah, I think the main question or the first thing that we always start with is what are we actually trying to solve, right? So what are we improving on the customer side, for in my case, end customer side, that will help us, and what data do we have that could potentially provide value, or maybe what data do we not have? An example there would be, since we have so many products, a lot of them have just one size left. How can we better match that product to a customer that coincidentally likes the product and has that same size? Trying to make an inference there will, on the one hand, make it easier for the customer to buy something, and probably also faster. That provides them value. Getting your exact size without asking you will probably be a little bit more difficult. So that would then be, for example, that's something that we're currently thinking about, is like, how do we get that information without having to ask you that question? And how can we make that as precise as possible so that you also don't have to return it?
And then in general, do you follow a specific process that for example, that there is a gate review? First you have the ideation, like we need to develop this business value, or create this business value, then you have a gate review. Does it surpass a particular threshold, and then we get into the specifics, or is that not like really the case currently?
Yeah, so O3 is a scale up, so we need to build fast, deliver value fast, and you generally get a little bit of time, and that's also some of the things that I struggle with, right? So I need to provide value within, 1, 2, 3 months, very quickly, otherwise it shuts down and we need to move on to the next thing. So there for me, it's how many shortcuts can I take in the beginning to provide the value, and then it's the ideation and scaling up, and creating maybe the standards that you're talking about, maybe retroactively, because the value comes first in my case. And also getting that buy-in, because once you prove some sort of value, maybe it's in an A/B test or whatever, that gives then, that frees up resources, perhaps also in other teams that can then help me scale it up in an effective way.
Perfect. Yeah, it's still working. Wannes, first you have done the ideation, checking whether there's some data that's going to be created. Then there's a building phase, of course. Given that you're, in my opinion, one of the experts in building data products, given your experience at Conveyor, what are like the different phases within the building phase itself? And what is like the biggest challenge, the main difficulty when you're building data products?
Yeah, and let me first remind you, you can ask questions, so ask questions in between.
You're going to be better even.
So there are already. Let me first answer this question though. What we typically say is, with a data product, you move from ID to production. So ID, why are you doing it? What is it? What you're really trying to solve? Thinking about feasibility, which data do we have? Just as Nikki is describing, what is the expected outcome? Would that be valuable to our company? And if you have that, then typically you move towards a kind of what we call experimentation. Think about the notebook phase before you actually start building something. Quickly iterate if we combine certain data, if we apply something, does actually what we believe will come out, does it actually comes out? Before you start maturing this in a more software development lifecycle way, where you write code, tests, deploy scripts, moving from dev to production. So it's really the build, mature phase. And then you enter the run phase, so making sure that you have monitoring, the right monitoring in place, everything is up and running. And then you start iterating again. Second version of your product, third version of your product. All those things are more and more entering data product development in your company, but most companies are doing this in combination with making this data and this data product development accessible for more and more people. So not anymore this central data engineering team, but spread throughout the company. And it's mostly this spreading throughout the company that has some technological implications. It's about lowering the technical barrier, going from Scala, Python towards SQL or drag and drop environments to make sure that more people can do this, while definitely at a given scale, while keeping the maturity, the software development lifecycle in place. That's a hard thing, but it's purely a technological and a process thing. It's about explaining them, this is how we go from dev to prod. You can really note that down in a process. The hardest thing is the step before, is thinking, why are we going to do something? What is it, what we want to reach, what is value? That's probably the hardest thing, even more than the technological stuff.
And there were some questions from the audience.
If you don't mind, I would just add something to what Wannes said. With a data product, compared to a data set, you've got the right to be wrong. So you can start by doing something and realize it's actually not correct, and iterate to the next version of the data product. So that's a major difference, because you're in product thinking, you're not in a project mode anymore.
And when to stop incrementing, like when you realize this is not going to work out.
You never stop incrementing.
Just continue.
Keep continuing
until it finally works out.
Well, the thing is, it's like a software. You know, software is or a model is AI. You keep making it better. There's always this life cycle. You know, I've rarely seen things that don't stop evolving. It happens, but not that much actually.
Like also, for example, in general, have you ever seen actually a depreciated data product? Because there is one point potentially that it should be depreciated.
Of course, and I think it's part of the life cycle of a product, right? The thing is, at some point you've got to say, okay, it's too old, it's too crappy, I want to replace it by something else. Then even at the version level Okay, so let's say, hey, I'm starting with this data product that has all these fields. Then I realize that my consumers want more fields or want more data or want an embedded model into it or whatever. Then at this point, I can say, okay, I'm working on version 2, but version 1 is still alive. And then I can say, within the data product, I can specify that version 1 is going to expire, let's say, in 6 months, okay, and my end of life is going to be in a year. So I can specify all this information in the data product, which is this kind of level of information you cannot add to a data set, okay? Or you can write it eventually in a Confluence page somewhere that nobody's going to read anyway. Okay? So you can have all this metadata, all this even what I call the metadata, because it's really the behavioral of both the data and the metadata that you can document directly in your data product.
And there were questions as well.
Anyways, thanks. I'm the head of computational biology in a pharmaceutical company, and so we deal with big volumes and quite heterogeneous data. One of the principles that often recur is the FAIR principle. So it's information that is findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. And I was wondering, what is the link between data products, and is there a link between data products and the FAIR principles?
So to summarize for the camera, is there a link between the FAIR methodology and data products?
I'm happy to go into this. I think, yes, there are concepts quite logically mapped. First of all, if you look to findable, previously you had data catalogs being filled after the facts. I think we're moving more and more towards data contracts, which is providing the metadata on the fly before the facts, but still filling the same catalog, so making everything available so that everyone can actually search through all data products that are out there. Probably we're going to move from data catalog to data product catalog, so there's still a way to go, but I think it's a bit a direction we're heading. But if you then talk about accessible, I think that's where definitely, again, data contracts with describing the output ports. Maybe you have different output ports on one data product. This is my full data product. This is my masked data product, because people in America can only see the American data and the Europeans can only see the European data. So
I have both passports.
So some can see everything. But there's something in data products about accessibility. Interoperable, that's when you're trying to go towards this connected set of data products which allow you to build data products on top of data products. So there's quite of a link. I think, as I said, the biggest difference is moving from the concept from data catalogs, data sets, single data sets, towards data products where you combine certain elements and where you provide much more metadata up front.
If I may also quickly add, when you look at what Jean-Marc Begani described as when she wrote the data mesh book, which is once more an assembly of data products, she defines data product as discoverable. I have to take notes for this one. Discoverable, addressable, understandable, natively accessible, trustworthy, interoperable, provides value, valuable, and secure. So basically, you find all the FAIR in your dative. Okay, so you just, the acronym changes a little bit, but you find them as well. So I would say just a superset in a way.
And was there a second question as well, somewhere in the audience?
I'm a software engineer or data engineer, and whenever I think data products, I always think microservices. Software engineering point of view, right? Like the philosophy behind it, very, very similar, in my opinion. And back when I was a full-fledged software engineer, I've seen microservices fail quite too many times in my opinion. And I've always thought to myself, it's not about the philosophy behind it, because I'm a strong believer in that. It's always been about the ideation and the design of these microservices. Basically, if the architecture of your house is poor, your house will fall apart, right? That's always been. So the things that I've seen are a lot of duplication of code and logic, a lot of extra overhead cost in the communication intra these microservices, where extra communication models have to be built. And basically my question is, what are some of the key pitfalls to avoid when designing your data products? How do you tackle these? And what are some of the key cornerstones to always keep at the back of your head when actually designing them?
Is that what we say with self-consulting?
Time result.
And so, a quick summary for the recording, of course. What is the cornerstone, or which cornerstones do you take into account when you're developing a data product, and which pitfalls do you try to prevent when you're developing a data product without turning into, for example, issues with microservices? Is that an accurate summarization of your answer? Perfect. Who would like to answer that one?
So, okay, I get the so first thing is, I'm a software engineer, but I self-identify as a data engineer now. We can have a beer. I don't like to compare it to microservices. I don't, because for me, microservices have never been a medium for exchanging data. And I think that when you bring it to data engineers and you say, hey, it's the same, I know it's not exactly the same thing, right? There's a thing of, there's this confusion there. So when I don't really like the comparison, because it comes down a bit to the architecture, you know, and I really think that the idea of microservice is, it can be used for controlling, it can be used for, we use, for example, when we built our data product on our data mesh, we used a big load of microservices, but they were all not for accessing the data. Okay, they were always to control. There was for dictionary purpose, for observability purpose, for control purpose, but never they were for touching the data. So the data was accessible always by something else. So there's a place for microservices. I don't think it's with data. Does that, and I know it's not exactly the answer you're expecting, but it should clarify a little bit how I see things.
For me, it was more about like how do you actually design a good data product, right? Because the reason that I've seen microservices fail is it's just because of design.
And I think it's the same thing. I think it's okay to fail. Okay, it's because the whole thing is, it goes back to a big debate we have in the data mesh community, which is basically the same as data product, is how you design or how you model the data model for this specific use case. Okay, so the way we did it is, yes, modeling is important, but you also don't want to over model, because then you get nothing. Okay, so that's why I keep saying, and people are a little bit shocked when I say when it's okay to fail, but when you talk to data engineers and they say it's okay to fail, you enable them in thinking differently than just building pipelines.
Maybe if I can help in there as well. So I think two things that really helped me in building these data products, not a software engineer, but are on the one hand, keeping in mind every time, what is the purpose that I'm serving, and does this fit in that purpose, yes or no? And if not, is there maybe another place in which you can fit it? And I think the second part is then, for me, it was super valuable to share whatever output that we generated very early on with end users and stakeholders, that allowed us to very quickly iterate on where we found mistakes. And I think especially that second part was something that really helped us move faster than we did in the past, because we could iterate and we could filter out things and find stuff that was maybe more useful. So if I were to do this again, I would definitely do that in a very early stage, even though you know maybe the data quality is bad or you don't have all of the information yet. Getting those inputs early on is really useful.
I think if you compare data products as the counterpart of a monolithic data lake, and I think that's a bit where the microservices are the exact opposite from mainframe applications. I think we've seen fail both. No one likes to maintain mainframes. No one likes to narrow down microservices too micro. I think that's what you need to keep in mind in your data product design, just as in microservices. And it's a bit this, what I referred to previously, balancing a fit-for-purpose data product and a reusable data product. So yes, you as a data product team want to solve your specific problem, but you fit into a larger organization. And what you need to be built is to be reused within your organization. And it's finding a good balance there. And I don't have the answer how to do so, but I do recognize that going too far into breaking down in small chunks is probably an issue as well. But as Jean-Joseph is saying, you first probably need to fail to get it right. So I still believe this is the right way to do so, and where it ends up in which constellation is still to be found. But it's what you're trying to do is find an answer towards you have a monolithical environment owned by a single team. We're now trying to put responsibility by those that know the data and get the metadata from moving from catalogs after the facts to contracts before the facts. So getting everything you need to use this data and logically combined and placing ownership at a single place. How granular you're going to do this is probably something we still need to figure out.
Wannes, how important is ownership for successful data product adoptions?
I think it's the key concept is probably the reason of existence of data products and data mesh in general. So what we've always seen is you have business knowing data and then a central data team trying to get the data, understand the processes, reiterate on all that stuff, and data ownership from data stewards at business side and technical ownership was separated. What data products is trying to solve, the main issue is getting the ownership of data together with the ownership of technology and technical data. You only need to call one guy and he's actually able to solve the issue when there is some. So in my opinion, ownership is the key cornerstone. The only thing, again, it's all work in progress. What are the responsibilities of an owner? It's still not completely decided probably.
Nikki, within both of you, what are the responsibilities of a data product owner?
Good question. I am the owner in this case, so yeah. So my data products are user feed algorithms, right? So eventually my ownership goes as far as if the algorithm produces bad results, it goes back to me. If the price is wrong and suddenly I start selling shoes for €1, I'm responsible. So that is as far as we go at this point. But then on the other hand, I'm also technically responsible. So if someone queries my data or audits my data, I'm the one that needs to respond to those types of questions. So the way I've then set up my team is that I have both people that know the business side and understand perhaps pricing, and also the technical people that can, that build the algorithms, that get the data and ensure that it's clean. And they work together so that we minimize that risk of selling shoes for €1.
And then it's, for example, the user support. Is it your responsibility, your task, or is it more like the business analyst, his or her task?
Yeah, so they need to respond to those queries, but we do have a cutoff point, right? So I do use data sets to create my data product, and I'm not responsible for not all data sets. So there's other teams that are responsible for certain data sets that I use, and then there's a few that I own myself in the team. So it really depends a little bit on where that line is exactly.
And I think it's also like a process.
Yeah, sure.
The responsibility.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of questions there. There was, and in the back also one. There was raising on.
Had a follow-up question, so let's not go back there.
It's your turn to drink, sorry. There was a question.
Yeah, I always struggle with the concept of operational data when we talk about data products. Where do you position them? Because it's not always that there is a direct user, but still it's very essential in your organization. Do you consider them as a data product or not?
I don't make a difference. Of course, there's intrinsic difference in how you store your data, in how the data is processed, how the data quality is, so latency in which you're accessing the data. But from your data product can access and should be able to provide those operational data and analytics data. But right now, I would say that most use case I'm seeing is more around analytics.
And then coming back to what the previous discussion, ownership on that data, do you then consider that operational data and analytical data should be owned by the same people or separately?
I don't care.
Yeah, but the organization scale.
For me, it's separate. So I'm not owner of the operational data in this case. That's done by.
But I want to say why I don't care. It's because the way we define data products, you can define what stakeholders you want in it. So it's not for me to force a model on you, but you have your organizational model and you can implement it in the data product. So data product is not forcing a methodology on you. You force yours on it. So, for example, Nikki is a data product owner. I work with a company that they want a business data product owner and a technical data product owner. I think it's a stupid idea, honestly, but they wanted to work it this way. I'm not the one that telling them it's stupid. Still not mentioned, but I provide a way to do it.
But what works best by your experience?
It's really, I think it's really how the company works. It's always such a change when you're bringing a data mesh or data product that you don't want to force another organizational change. This is all about the culture of change of the company. Okay, so the way I would say is probably even having a different data product, okay, as we were saying, the source aligned data product and the more consumer aligned data product. It's probably that the way you're looking at analytics versus operational data, it might actually be two different data products, but in some cases you want to merge them. You know, it's really, it's a discussion. Once more, it's how the company is already operating. I don't want to be too prescriptive on that. Because there's other things where I really care. Like, I really care about you are the data contract. I really care about what you put in your data contract. I don't really care how you are organized, because if your business is working correctly, then let's keep it working this way.
I'm a bit more opinionated.
Please.
Yeah, I want to start with, I totally agree with Joseph. Operational data and analytical data should be considered a bit the same. But I want to refer to the example that I was referring to, what triggered my need for data products. If you see the teams building a new operational system, they're responsible for the data in their system. They have a business owner, which was a product owner of the system, and they open up their data internally towards the other applications via APIs, which are kind of the same things as a data contract. It's a different way of exchanging data, but it's solving the same issue. For me, the responsibility to open up their data for more analytical purposes should be put in the same team. They know the data, they know the processes being handled, and it's not only about making sure that you shift the responsibility for enclosing the data towards the data environment, towards that team, because then they can just say, here's a dump from my database and please go on. No, that you still need to understand the business and logic. So for me, it's really the operational team that needs to offer data in a given set. Like for example, team from CRM, these are my customers and most logic is being applied. But just a building block, a source aligned data product. And then from there on, who picks it up probably becomes the owner of derived data products.
So for the source aligned data products, there is no incentive for the application team to become the owner or to take the responsibility of the data products. So they will not always fly and come to the
I disagree. I disagree as well. Purely bottom up, yes. We have our application, it works in production like it should, so everything's fine and the data in there, I don't touch it. Maybe it's bad, maybe it's good, but the application works. That's already the first problem. Yeah, the data in your application should be correct to actually serve the purpose of your product. But then in the next step, you could also say, okay, let's make sure we already own data quality, but we don't own disclosing our data because there's no value for it in us. The first data products we were building at DPG Media was exactly a source-aligned data product. We had 4 subscription systems, building a 5th one with the goal to migrating to that one. If you acquire a lot of companies, suddenly you get into this situation. What they did was still building, let's build our first data product. These are our subscriptions, and suddenly we can put an API on top of it towards our call center agents, and suddenly our call center agents have one single view where they see all subscriptions. So there was already an internal use case for them. So it might even help them. And then there's not the bottom up, but maybe the top bottom approach. It's like, there's an interest for the company, and maybe you as a team don't care, but you should care about your company goals as well.